Welcome to Articulate This, where we dive into the minds shaping tomorrow's technologies. In today's episode, we have the privilege of speaking with Emma Collyer, an executive and leadership coach with over a decade of experience helping leaders achieve their full potential. Emma will share her insights on overcoming challenges, building trust within teams, and developing executive presence. She emphasizes the importance of self-reflection, resilience, and effective communication for leaders at all levels. Here's what you'll learn: how to recognize when you need a coach and how to find the right one, strategies for building resilience and bouncing back from setbacks, tips for transitioning from manager to leader and building credibility, techniques for fostering and rebuilding trust within teams, and ways to enhance your executive presence and turn a good team into an exceptional one. So hit subscribe and don't miss this episode packed with valuable insights and practical advice. This episode will elevate your leadership game. This is Articulate This. Let's get into it. Hi, Emma. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. How are you?
Not bad. So tell me, what is an executive and leadership coach, and why did you choose to become one?
Yeah, so an executive and leadership coach is somebody who primarily focuses on working with executives and people who are in leadership positions. And I particularly enjoy working on leadership topics. There are multiple challenges that come with being in a more significant position within an organization, and just really enjoy helping people overcome those. And the reason I became one, I had the pleasure of being coached myself about 10, 15 years ago now, and just really noticed the transformational difference it made to me in my workplace and how I felt about myself and doing my job. And so that was something that really intrigued me, and I wanted to learn how to do that because it's kind of felt almost a little bit magical at the time when I was experiencing coaching myself. And just, yeah, I wanted to be able to help other people overcome challenges similar to myself and help them be, the best that they possibly could be.
So how does someone know that they need a coach? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah, I think typically when people are feeling stuck with something, so they may be facing a problem or a challenge at work, and they've exhausted all options that they know of and all the tools that they're familiar with, and nothing's working. And so they are wanting some support and guidance from either somebody that's been there and done that, or just somebody that's going to help them think through those options. So that's typically when people do reach out for a coach. I would say there are other individuals who just want to generally improve what they're doing at work. And so a coach will help you do that and be more effective in your role. So I work with people who are in leadership positions already and just want to be the best that they can be. And so working with a coach helps to do that. So I'm going to say oftentimes we don't feel like we might need a coach, but I would question or challenge, when we feel comfortable or perhaps we're not moving forward, that might also be the time to reach out, because we can inadvertently be stagnating in our positions and need a bit of a push ourselves to move ourselves forward.
How would you assess that other than feeling stuck? What should someone be looking for to realize, hey, you know what, I need a coach? And then how do you find the right coach? Because there may be certain areas that performance coaches may help you achieve different results. So how do you go about finding the right coach and assessing your needs properly?
Yeah, I think often whilst you might be comfortable with what you're doing, you might want to reach, I'm going to say, to the next level in your career, or we might be looking for something different from your work life. And so that is a time to kind of look and assess what is it that's important to you. And so a coach can help you do that. And I'm going to say trying to find the right coach can be challenging, and often people go with referrals, somebody that their friend or colleague has worked with, and that is a great way to have a conversation. I would say with that as well, make sure you connect with that coach and just check that they're right for you, because I've worked with somebody before that wasn't right for me, but was right for a colleague. And so having a conversation, probably with 2 or 3 coaches, to check out, is this going to work? Are they the right person for me? And do we have a good enough connection to go forwards, because you're going to be sharing a lot of, I'm going to say, personal information. You're going to have to be vulnerable in that conversation. And if you're not comfortable doing that, you're not going to get the best out of the relationship. And I'm going to say, if you're thinking about where do I start, there is a resource called the International Coaching Federation, and they list certified coaches. So you can go in and search for a coach in a particular area that you're looking for, and it'll give you the ones close to you if you're looking for that, and also coaches that work virtually as well. So that's a really good starting point.
Let's get into the nitty gritty of certain areas where coaching could help. So let's understand resilience. Can you share a personal story or of a time when you faced significant setback, and how did you maintain your energy and self-belief during that period?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's a good question. So there's been a number of times when I've faced this. I think a few years ago when I was going for a different role, I was applying for jobs and I kept getting rejected, either from the getting to the next step of an interview or getting to an interview and then just not being successful. And it seemed to be relentless. And that was really hard to maintain that self-belief that, yes, I am capable of doing that. I am going to be successful at some point. And I think what I did, I took a break. So I stepped back and kind of reflected on what I was learning through all of the experiences, which felt negative at the time, but were also providing some helpful information to me, and doing a bit of a reality check of, okay, where am I now? You know, what is the gap? What am I hearing? What am I seeing and noticing? And what do I need to focus on next to be successful? I think just giving ourselves that space and capacity to rest as well is really helpful, because we can put so much energy into something. And when it's not successful or it pushes us back, it can be hard to come back. So just giving ourselves that time and space to recover and rest is really important.
Yeah, I've recently started going down the rabbit hole of sleep studies of people that specialize in like lack of sleep and what it can do to your performance and your cognitive ability. It's a very fascinating topic in itself. So that's great advice. So besides that, sort of taking a step back, is there any other sort of key strategies you suggest for someone to try to bounce back from a personal or professional challenge?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say is recognize what brings you joy generally, I'm going to say. So for me, it's spending time with family and friends and just those activities that you really enjoy outside of whatever challenge you're facing, that is going to make you feel re-energized and refreshed. It might be some physical activity. It just might be, just spending time reading a book, whatever, really helps you, but just making sure you're carving out that space for yourself to re-energize.
How important is resilience for a leader, and how can they cultivate it in their teams?
Yeah, I think when you're in a leadership position, you're going to face multiple challenges, sometimes all at the same time. And so your ability to deal with that is going to be really crucial to your success. And what I would say, if you're trying to lead a team and demonstrate that, you do that by showing the behaviors and characteristics that you want others to display if they're faced with challenges as well. So perhaps dealing with them in a calm way, in a collected way, being reflective, being curious about what's going on, I think can really help, and not, I'm going to say, blaming others if things are not going your way as well. I think demonstrating those is the best way to bring out those qualities in others when you're in a leadership position.
So let's talk about kind of the transition from more of a manager to a leader. And what are the most common challenges you've observed when managers transition to leaders?
Yes, and it's a really interesting one. And this is often a challenge I hear from my clients. So typically, I'm going to say people that are moving from those roles are trying to use the same skill sets and approaches that they use as a manager to be successful when they're leading a team. And often that is a very different skill set and approach that you need. When you're in a leadership position, you're looking to inspire and motivate people, often very highly educated people, and you're wanting to get the best out of those individuals. So telling them what to do, giving them a task, is not going to be the best way to really drive that delivery, that motivation and enthusiasm for the work and for them to excel. So often we go from this kind of manager telling a task this is very specific and the I want it to be done, rather than a leader who is inspiring, motivating, and saying, well, this is the outcome we want to achieve, but how you get there is up to you. So it's very different, but that is often the biggest challenge and hurdle I hear.
When you have a top performer, I think the first step in an organization, they try to reward them by giving them a team and putting them in that position. But they are top performers. They may most likely will not have experience in leading a team. There's not the support. So this is a very interesting and fascinating topic in itself. On that note, so then how does one build credibility and a reputation in a new leadership role without having all the answers?
Yeah, and that's a challenging one. I've been there myself. I'm going to say, spend some time learning about the role, spend some time speaking to your team, understanding what are the challenges they are facing, what motivates them, why do they get up in the morning, how can you help them overcome the challenges that they are facing in order to be really successful in delivering across that team. And I'm going to say, admit when you don't know something as well. Typically, if you're moving into a leadership position, you might not necessarily be a technical expert from that field. And so being upfront about that, but being willing to find out enough about the job that you can make decisions effectively is going to be key to your success. But it is a challenge for sure.
Can you share an example from your coaching where helping a manager transition to a leader was particularly successful?
Yes, absolutely. I have a couple. I recently helped somebody who wanted to get a promotion, so was in a management position and was struggling to see what the roadblock was. And so I worked with that individual to really break down some of those challenges. And a part of it was about understanding, I'm going to say, perceptions and views of themselves from the leadership team, understanding how they could position themselves more effectively, having questions about, timing of things that might happen in the organization, how that impacts them, and just really doing a bit of research around the background, because I think there was an assumption that things should just happen. But actually there was all this backstory that needed to be fully understood in order for them to approach things in the right way. And so I assisted my client in thinking through how to approach particularly difficult conversations, how to raise, I am interested in my future, but doing it in such a way that is not coming across, it's all about me. You're thinking of the wider organization, what is going on, what is happening in the future, how do I fit, or how does this position fit into the future? So that was a really interesting conversation. And through working with that individual over several months, they were able to secure a more senior leadership position and move from that kind of manager to leader role. So, which was great to see.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk about lack of trust. So what are the early signs of lack of trust within a team, and how can it impact performance?
Yeah, so when we notice kind of lack of trust, typically there will be a withholding of information. So people become very secretive and protective over what they know, and they don't want to share it with anybody else because knowledge is power in that situation. I often see or hear as well blaming culture. As a team member or another team is responsible for something, it's not my fault. And so that is typically happening. And there may be some gossiping about another team or a team member behind their back, which is not helpful or constructive. So you might notice those kinds of behaviors. And I say in a more negative setting, you may notice passive aggressive behavior if you're within that team, and that's being noticed across those conversations. So there's a few different things, but typically withholding information and not willing to collaborate are the key pieces at the front end that I would be kind of red flagging and say, okay, what's going on here? Why are we not being open with each other? So that's what I would say around that piece.
That's interesting, because that sounds like everything when OpenAI had their debacle about a month ago when they tried to remove Sam Altman as CEO. It was just weird how abruptly he was removed and then returned. And it sounded like everything that you just talked about, hidden information, people were not communicating, where that lack of trust broken down. That's at a very public scale in the news. But what you also explain is I've encountered that, and I've seen that in the workforce. in large organizations where that's kind of like the norm of the culture that's there. That's how people operate and get things done. So what kind of strategies do you recommend for fostering trust in that professional environment when you counter things like that, when there's a lack of trust?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's really difficult if it's an embedded way of working in the culture of the organization. That's really challenging because then you are the outlier if you're doing something different. But what I would say, if it's something that you really value and want to foster, then demonstrating openness and transparency with what you're doing needs to be the first step. And part of that will be sharing information, sharing experiences, and doing what you say you're going to do. You know, if you're saying, oh, I'll get that report to you next week, do it. You know, don't withhold that or restrict what you're doing. So I think just really being able to demonstrate those qualities that you're looking from others will help foster that trust. But it is a big challenge when culturally, particularly if it's demonstrated right at the top of the organization, that is going to be tough to work within that environment.
How should one approach a conversation where trust needs to be rebuilt?
I'm going to say this is challenging because if trust has been broken, then it is really hard to rebuild it and you have to put a lot of effort into it. I'm going to say if you were part of the problem, admit your responsibility and role in that. If it's between, yourself and another individual, explain your intent. So I want to positively work with you. I want to rebuild this. I've noticed things are not working as well. I realize I perhaps have not helped the situation, and just rebuild it from the start by, again, building in that openness and transparency and being a bit vulnerable with that other person. But it takes a lot of effort, and both parties need to want to do it as well. It's no good if you're really willing, but the other person isn't. So you need to have that conversation to understand where you can go forward.
How do you define executive presence and why is it important?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I know there's quite a few books and pieces of literature around this, and the descriptions are very vague. But what I'm going to say about definition, executive presence is, if you see it in somebody, you're typically seeing somebody who's very confident. They come across as being very credible and authentic in senior leadership situations. And they appear very polished and professional as well. Plus, they're able to communicate effectively and succinctly. So those are typically the things that you will notice when executive presence is there. And I'm going to say it's important because if you're wanting to progress in your career to those executive roles, these are the things you're going to need to embody in order to be successful and to be considered for those positions. They will, if you don't, then they're going to look for somebody else that does. And so it's knowing that, okay, this is my line, this is my trajectory. What do I need to do in order to get there? So those are the key pieces. And when you see people that have these qualities, it's really obvious. They're very effective. They come in the room, they're confident, and you're like, okay, wow, okay, they're a leader. And then others that don't exude those qualities, you don't notice perhaps as much. And so it's making yourself stand out and be visible in those rooms.
So what are your top tips for someone looking to develop their executive presence?
Yeah, I think first I would say assess where you think you are and perhaps speak with a colleague to get their viewpoint as well. So what is coming across well and what is not as perhaps coming across as you would wish in terms of those qualities. I guess one of the things I would say is, how confident are you? Are you confident in yourself? How are you coming across to people when you're talking to them? Think about your body language, think about your tone, and also think about your appearance. Now, I'm not going to give a description of what people should be wearing, but typically, what are your executives wearing in your organization? How are they coming across? Nobody is going to be telling you what you should be wearing, but thinking about, do you look polished? Do you look professional? How are people going to see you? Because I'm going to say, generally it's well known within a few seconds, people have an impression of you. So make sure it's a really good one and that you fit into that executive arena.
That is a good one because I actually heard someone tell me he was a lead sales account director and he had to bring someone in to help him pitch business. And the person he brought did not, I'm not sure if the right word is respect, but understand the client they were going to and didn't dress to fit in that culture. And ultimately made it very difficult for them to close the deal because they thought, who is this person? Why is he coming here? Not understanding our dress code and our way. So it does go a long way because it builds another layer of trust to understand that you get them and you respect based on how they like to operate.
Yeah, absolutely. Understand your audience.
Um, yeah, it's very true. Can you share a success story where enhancing executive presence made a significant difference?
Yeah, I share a personal experience of mine. Several years ago, I was asked to present to a group of area directors. So I think there's maybe 15 to 20 area directors all sat in a very big boardroom, and I was going to be talking to them about a particular project I had been working on. And so I really thought through how I wanted to come across. So my communication that day was very succinct. I did my presentation verbally. I didn't rely on PowerPoint slides because I knew I was presenting at the end of the day in the last slot. So they were going to be really tired, probably seen a lot of information, and maybe the attention was drifting at that point. So I wanted to be snappy with what I said, to the point, have some recommendations and good discussion points, but be confident in what I was saying. I also thought about what I was wearing, again, appropriate to that room. I wanted to look professional and credible to that group. And so I really focused on that. And it was a success. I had a lot of positive comments afterwards. I was seen as somebody that was authentic. And I can't even remember what they said about the presentation in the end, but just that how I had come across was really authentic and credible in that environment, which is what I wanted to do. And so just being able to be yourself, but be seen in the right places is really key to this as well.
For someone taking over a new team, a team that may be low performing or disengaged, what are the first steps that they should do?
Yeah, I think I was reflecting on a team that I took on a few years ago. The first thing I did was spend time getting to know each of the team members, because often they will share a lot with you. Why are they disengaged? Why is the team low performing? What else is going on? And just really trying to understand what the challenges are that they've been facing. And so once you have that information, then you can start having a conversation with the whole team about what is the team identity? What do we want to be known for? What are the skills and unique aspects we all bring? And so just starting from that point. But the initial conversation and getting to know people on a one-on-one basis is really key here.
So then how do you handle or recommend dealing with resistance from team members in the situation?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of when I faced this. So the team I'm thinking of, again, I was asked to come in and turn around a particular team. And when I was having one-on-one conversations, one of the team members turned around to me and said, "We don't need you. Why are you here? We've been managing ourselves successfully for the last few months without a manager. We don't need anybody." And so that was quite a response to receive. And so I think my comment at the time was, okay, well, let's just see how we go with this. But I'd really like to continue the conversation and see if we can work effectively together. But that was a challenge. And I think if you're facing that on a regular basis as you're working with the team, take the conversation offline and have a private conversation and really dig into what's going on there. And if necessary, if you're in a team setting and somebody's kind of calling out and saying this is all terrible, just call them out and say, this isn't helpful. This isn't maybe appropriate in this conversation. Let's take this somewhere else. But it's just trying to keep those relationships going and building those over time, particularly if you've had a team that's been disengaged from the outset.
So what ended up happening with that team? Were you able to turn it around?
I was. So after I left that team, I was actually, a couple of team members actually gave me a hug, I have to say. And one of them said, you've restored my belief in managers again. So that was really heartening to hear, particularly as they were so reluctant to have me there in the first place. So yeah, I felt very happy with how that worked out in the end.
Let's talk a little bit about team coaching and how do you approach analyzing and improving team dynamics?
Yeah, I think this one, I would, again, spend some time watching the interactions on, have one-on-ones with each individual within a team if you can, to get that kind of narrative and context of what is going on in the background of a team. And if you can, I'm going to say interview people in advance of the session, particularly if I'm going into a team coaching. I want to understand from everybody in advance of that session what I'm what I'm facing, but also what their challenges are. So then you can understand what typical dynamics might show up when you bring the team together. And also get some feedback from other teams or peers or supervisors. So how is that team being seen elsewhere in the organization? Because there might be some other stories and pieces that is helpful to understand if you're going into that team coaching environment. So I guess do your research if you're going into that situation, and then just pick up on those individual interactions as well.
I love that piece of advice. Even just if you were to take that a step further when you talk in when the group is meant to do brainstorming in general. This is one thing that I was surprised when I learned this. The studies show that if you prep like for brainstorming, bringing people in a room and just asking them to brainstorm is ineffective, and you're not going to get a true brainstorm. You're probably just going to get one or two loud voices that drive the conversation.
Yeah.
Where brainstorming really was effective is when you gave people time to think in advance and then bring their brainstorming ideas to share with the group when you went into the brainstorming session. So then you could actually dissect it and do offshoots of that. So I love that advice.
Yeah, thank you. I think the more time you give people to consider their thoughts, the better conversation you're going to have from the start.
So what's your approach to taking a good team to an exceptional level, making them a great team?
Yeah, I think, as we mentioned, spending that time, investing that time individually to understand what motivates them, because that is really going to help you move towards that exceptional delivery. Understanding everyone has something different they want to get from work, whatever that looks like, understanding what makes them tick. So that's the key piece. But I think sometimes we miss the kind of structure and framework of a team. So focusing on getting the basics right in the team. So this might be some really key admin pieces that you're looking at. And I've done this with teams in the past. But if you're not getting the basics right around your admin, how on earth are you going to deliver and be effective with these bigger projects or whatever it is that you're faced? And so really pushing energy in the bits that are perhaps less interesting and are more difficult to overcome is going to pay dividends in the end. So I think that's what I would say, and I've used that approach many times to great success.
How do you handle conflicts within a team, and how do you ensure you end up making a positive outcome versus creating ripple effects and more toxic divide?
Yeah, I think for this, try and take it offline if you can. If you're in a team setting, you're noticing this between two individuals, speak to them both separately first to understand, what are the motives, the intentions, what is the miscommunication that perhaps is happening here. Kind of necessary, ask them to discuss later or highlight to them that it's not appropriate if they're bringing things up in the team setting and it's derailing the conversation. Just put a mark in it and say, okay, I can see there's something going on here, but can we take this offline? This is not why we're here today to talk about the project delivery, whatever it is you're focused on, but really trying to address that separately. And I think on occasion, I've had to call people out in that setting, in that group setting, and just say, okay, this isn't appropriate. Can we have a conversation later on about this? And then taking it offline again and sitting down, explaining to them why it wasn't appropriate and why are they bringing that up. And so just really digging in to understand what is going on for that individual again, because often you can resolve that so they come back together and it's much more effective.
So part of the premise of the podcast show is to learn more about our guests behind the scenes. So as we get into that fun part of the show now, what drives you in your professional life?
Yeah, I think originally, so my professional life started out, I trained as a landscape architect and I moved into environmental impact assessment and then kind of management and leadership roles within the environmental sector before moving into coaching. So my original drive, I'm going to say, was, and it sounds a bit cliche, but it was about leaving the world in a better place. I still am passionate about protecting the environment and caring for the environment and leaving things in a better state than we have them now. So that was definitely my initial drive. And then as I've progressed more into coaching, for me, it's about helping people. So helping people do their jobs more effectively, helping them overcome their challenges. and helping them to feel like they have support when perhaps they have tried everything else and they don't know what else to do. I have been there. It's really difficult. You can feel frustrated, upset, anxious, angry, and not know where to turn. So knowing that I'm helping people deal with that in an effective way is what drives me forward.
Can you think of something or something that kind of gave you the inspiration?
I think initially, I was always interested in the environments. My grandparents had a farm. I loved being outdoors. I valued the outdoors and I valued being around great people as well. So that kind of drove me in that direction. But I think in my career, I've had some fantastic managers and leaders that have really helped me and inspired me to be better and do better. They have demonstrated some wonderful, I'm going to say, empathetic qualities, but have also been courageous leaders and have been really cool and calm in a crisis as well. So there's been a lot of different people over the years that I have looked up to and have inspired me to develop my career and be better.
Can you share a favorite book or TV show you're currently watching or something you watched in the past?
Yeah, a recent book I've read, which I loved, was called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that really resonated with me, particularly running a business and just thinking about that differently. It had a very interesting approach in terms of how you build a business and time for yourself and kind of key mistakes along the way. So that is a book I really loved that I've read recently. If I'm honest, TV at the moment, I would say my husband would probably say Grey's Anatomy. I've watched the whole lot. And I think for me, the thing I loved about that program and similar programs, it's all about problem solving, it's all about people, and it's the combination of both. So that for me, I admit to having watched all of that.
How about what does a typical day like look for you? Any special rituals or routines that you follow?
I don't have, I'm going to say rituals. I tend to try and get up by 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to make sure, probably the first thing I do actually is make a coffee. I maybe sit there and just kind of contemplate the day for 20 minutes or so. And then I'm kind of getting up and starting work by 7:30. I try and do a lot of my difficult work, I'm going to say in the morning. So things like I do content creation, write posts. I do my lead generation work in the morning as well. So it's typically things that I find more challenging. I try and block off in the morning, and then I will do my calls with my clients and outreach calls sort of in the afternoon when I have a little bit more time, and networking as well. So a lot of my networking events, I try to focus on the ones that are later in the day, when perhaps I don't need to sit down and do some really focused work. So that's I'm going to say what a typical day would look like, but that moves around quite a lot as well.
What do you do to unwind or relax?
I would go for a walk. We have a nice black Labrador dog, so I'd probably go for a walk with my husband just to de-stress and walk. And we're located in a really beautiful place, so there's lots of lakes around us and woodlands. So go for a walk, just to unwind, talk about what's going on, get fresh air. Maybe do some exercise and just do some aerobic exercise to get things going again. And also then friends, we have some great friends locally who we would meet up with, maybe go for a drink or two and just unwind and hear what's going on for them as well. So that is typically what I would do for relaxing and unwinding.
Well, thank you very much for joining today, Emma. It's been great to learn your story. But before we go, can you, for people who want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so they can reach me through my website, so aspireexecutivecoaching.ca, or directly just email me. I'm happy to speak to anybody. So my email is emma@aspireexecutivecoaching.ca as well. So please reach out if you want to learn more. I offer free consultation sessions, 30-minute session at the beginning of a relationship with somebody, so I can learn more about you and what your needs are. So that is something I offer as well. And you can schedule a call through my website or just reach out and we can book something that way.
Fantastic. I'll have the information down below. But thanks again for joining. Take care,
Thank
Emma.
you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Enjoy your day.